According to the international news agency Reuters, a car bomb parked in a street of the Al-Hurriya district of Baghdad killed at least 8 people and wounded 30 more on October 30, 2016. The news story was mirrored by the New York Times that reported on Iraqi police claims of a car bomb exploding, this time killing 10 people and wounding 34 innocent bystanders. An Associated Press photographer also published 4 images of the site of the incident, describing it as, quote, the aftermath of a deadly car bomb explosion that hit a popular fruit and vegetable market in a commercial street in Baghdad's northwestern neighborhood of Hurriya. These photos were then disseminated and broadcast by a wide variety of mainstream media outlets to refer to the car bombing and the subsequent collateral damage. Security camera footage that emerged 3 days later pointed a fundamentally different picture. The story starts with a man hunched over what appears to be an abandoned car and then hastily makes his way over to a parked truck that he then enters and drives away in. About 15 or 20 seconds later, after the truck exited the scene, we see a massive explosion with smoke, fire, and debris flying everywhere. Within several seconds of the detonation, about a dozen people enter the screen from the left, running and immediately falling on the ground, pretending to be casualties of the explosion. They are accompanied by what appear to be concerned citizens flagging over a paramedics van, which then starts to load the alleged victims of the blast in for medical treatment. Some people barely able to move, and others pretending to be dead. One man is waving his hands in shock and panic, calling for help and assistance, as others rush in, seemingly putting themselves at risk in order to save lives from this vicious attack. The victims were running just moments ago from a safe distance away, yet now cannot walk or move and are dragged into the waiting ambulance by medical personnel to receive treatment or to be taken to the morgue. What we are witnessing is clear video evidence of a false flag operation, an act committed with the intent of disguising the actual source of responsibility and pinning blame on another party. The term false flag originated in the 16th century as an expression meaning an intentional misrepresentation of someone's allegiance, and has been used for centuries to sway public opinion, usually to incite outrage and justify military retaliation or invasion. In the 1500s, pirates flew the flag of a friendly nation to deceive merchant ships into allowing them to draw near. Similar acts of deception have been done by nations, usually by staging a real or simulated attack on their own side and saying the enemy did it as a pretext to going to war. That said, some historians claim that there was a back door to World War II, meaning that President Franklin D. Roosevelt, inhibited by the American public's opposition to direct U.S. involvement in the war, and determined to save Great Britain from a German victory in Europe, manipulated events in the Pacific in order to provoke a Japanese attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, thereby forcing the United States to enter the war on the side of Britain. This argument proposes that the key events leading up to the U.S. declaration of war in 1941 show that Roosevelt sometimes used deceitful tactics to increase U.S. involvement gradually and to stir up pro-war sentiments in the American public. By critically discerning media propaganda, some historians claim that the circumstances immediately surrounding the attack on Pearl Harbor, when interpreted in light of Roosevelt's behavior in the preceding years, strongly suggest that he intentionally provoked the Japanese attack. 2 years earlier, the Russian village of Manila came under shell fire. It was close to the Finnish border, and the Soviet Union used the alleged attack to break its non-aggression pact with Finland, starting the so-called Winter War. Historians have now concluded that the shelling of the village was not carried out by the Finnish army, but was a fabrication carried out by the Soviet NKVD state security agency. Boris Yeltsin, the first president of the Russian Federation, admitted in 1994 that the Winter War was a Soviet war of aggression. That said, there have been numerous alleged false flag attacks involving the US government. Operation Northwoods was a proposal to kill Americans and blamed the attack on Fidel Castro, thereby granting the American military the pretext to invade Cuba. The Kennedy administration ultimately rejected the plan. But that wasn't the only controversy involving Cuba. In 1898, a massive explosion of unknown origin sank the battleship USS Maine in Cuba's Havana Harbor, killing 260 American crew members. One of the first American battleships, the Maine weighed more than 6,000 tons and was sent to Cuba to protect the interests of Americans there after a rebellion against Spanish rule broke out in Havana in January. An official U.S. Naval Court of Inquiry ruled in March that the ship was blown up by a mine, without directly placing the blame on Spain. Much of Congress and a majority of the American public expressed little doubt that Spain was responsible and called for a declaration of war. Subsequent diplomatic failures to resolve the Maine matter, coupled with the United States' indignation over Spain's allegedly brutal suppression of the Cuban rebellion and continued losses to American investment, led to the outbreak of the Spanish-American War in April 1898. Within 3 months, the United States had decisively defeated Spanish forces on land and sea, and in August, an armistice halted the fighting. On December 12, 1898, the Treaty of Paris was signed between the United States and Spain, officially ending the Spanish-American War and granting the United States its first overseas empire, with the ceding of such former Spanish possessions as Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. In 1976, a team of American naval investigators concluded that the main explosion was likely caused by a fire that ignited its ammunition stocks and not by a Spanish mine or act of sabotage. For decades, a so-called anti-propaganda law prevented the U.S. government's covert broadcasting arm from delivering politically deceptive programming to American audiences. But in 2013, that came silently to an end with the implementation of a new reform passed under the Obama administration as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, which included an amendment that nullified the Smith-Mundt Act of 1948, which explicitly forbids information and psychological operations aimed at influencing U.S. public opinion. Critics claim that the act also unleashed thousands of hours per week of government-funded radio and TV programs for domestic U.S. consumption in what has been criticized as a green light for politically motivated social engineering and U.S. domestic propaganda efforts. This is why we see the same exact word-for-word news stories broadcast on every media news outlet.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about the trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish things simply aren't true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. My name is Robert Sepehr. I'm an anthropologist. My published work is available on Amazon and through all other major book outlets. If you'd like to support my work, you can do that through patreon.com. There should be a link in the description. Please subscribe for future updates. Leave your thoughts below. Have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you again soon.